First speaker for tonight is Joe.
Joe, alcoholic. Joe. So this is my first time speaking. I'm a little bit nervous. Just going over my story. Where it started, I grew up in New York. My dad was a New York City narcotics task force, super macho guy who drank every day and went to work every day. So I saw a functioning alcoholic my entire life. He never missed a day of work. He was up at 4 o'clock in the morning. He also had a super bad temper and would just take off, If he had an argument with my mom, he'd be gone for 3 or 4 months. And that's what I saw. But he never was able to get the drinking under control. And even before I knew what AA was, I would beg him to please stop. And eventually it killed him. He couldn't stop. But seeing how he was and how I was different. I wasn't like him. I wasn't, I had everything under control. At least I thought I did. And then my brother started drinking a lot. And he was drinking every night to the point that he was, he would pass out. I didn't do that. So again, I didn't have that kind of problem. My cousins, I had 2 of them that died from drug overdoses. Well, I smoked weed, did a little bit of everything, but I wasn't like them. So again, I didn't have any sort of problem. But my life kept on going in a certain direction. So I get married. My first marriage comes to an end because, I like to cheat. Okay, so what is that about? It's not anything having to do with substances. I also like to drink a lot. I was in my early 20s, and when you get your first corporate job, every day there's a happy hour. But I'm still going to work. I'm still with my boss, so it can't really be that bad. So what? I'm in New York City. There's after hours. You get done at 7 o'clock in the morning. You go straight to work. You can do it. It's fine. Everyone else is doing it. I still don't have any problems. Of course, the first marriage comes to an end, and I still don't have any problems. And I continue on my path and meet somebody else, and the drinking continues. But now it's different because it's every part of my life is kind of, I'm waiting, I'm searching for something that never comes. I'm always like looking for that next time that I get to let loose, that I get to be happy. So then it becomes that when I'm sad, I drink. When I'm happy, I drink. When there's nothing to do, I drink. But I have everything under control. I'm still going to work. I'm still doing everything that I should. And then, my second marriage comes to an end. And it kind of that is what brought me here. I had a really bad week in which I made some very, very bad decisions, including one to drive with my kid after having 2 bottles of soju, because that made a lot of sense during the middle of a contentious divorce proceeding. Because the thing that would really be good would be for me to have a DUI with my kid in the car during the middle of a divorce proceeding. So that was one day, during the week. There was another bad decision that I will not say here because it was really bad. And the last thing was, I thought it was a good idea because, I haven't been dating for a while, so I met some influencer, so that's a really good thing. So I got to take her to dinner so she could photograph the dinner that we were having. And I'm driving in Hollywood, drunk out of my mind, on the wrong side of the street, and I'm just like, what the hell is going on in my life? And these things are happening. There was a pattern. When my son wasn't with me, I would just drink. I would drink, and I found a restaurant that they would give me free drinks. So I was like, it was right around the corner. I thought that I had everything under control until that one last night where I'm going to lose my kid. Until it happens, And my brother, who was in the program, completely changed as a human being. He went through life as Larry David in real life. The biggest asshole you would ever meet. He had a problem with everybody. He still kind of does, but to a lesser degree. Now he'll make amends. But I saw what happened with him. He was confident. And then all of a sudden, all these things that used to happen that I used to think about, I've never been comfortable. When I was a kid, I was a punk rock kid who played sports. Nobody understood me. And that's the way I just went through life. Nobody got where I was coming from. The only time that I felt comfortable is when I would smoke weed or I would drink. That was the only time. And that made me, in my head, have this confidence that I never had normally. And all of a sudden I could talk to people, or at least I thought, well, what I really was doing was bothering people while they were trying to have dinner, and I was drunk out of my mind, on sake or something to that sort, But I didn't think like that. I thought that I had everything under control until I really, really didn't. And then when I got into these rooms, I realized that it wasn't the drinking. The drinking is just one thing. It was compulsive everything. It's the way that I eat. It's the way that I, approach relationships with cheating, and it was everything that I thought. I had never been taught, and I don't think really anybody is, how to deal with life. And I just white-knuckled it. So about 12 or 13 years ago, I quit for a year completely on my own. And it was because I was in a car. It was one of these, I was at a pitch and putt, and every hole we had 2 beers, because that makes sense. And then I went driving with with one of the guys who was a little less drunk than me, and of course he got a DUI. And the cop at that point told me, he was like, "Hey, your buddy almost killed you. You came 2 inches away from hitting a retaining wall." And I had at that point a 1-year-old at home, so I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna quit." And that was the worst year of my life because I just quit, and there was no release. I had no idea how to deal with life. I didn't realize. I thought it was just quitting, and all of a sudden things, become better. But when I came here, I started to realize that it was a way of thinking. It's the mindset. There is so much more. I'd never had a relationship with a higher power. Being here and surrendering to a higher power, going through a super vicious divorce with motions after motions after motions and more money going out the drain, I let things go. And it was the first time that I'd really done that. And it's the first time that I felt like I had community. I had people who understand the stupid things that I've done because they've done them or done worse. So we're all in the same boat, and I never felt that out there. I feel like the steps are it's a guideline to life. It's a guideline to having to deal with things, because now it's not like things are, I can't stand up here and say that things are great just yet. I still am waiting on a final signed settlement, with my wife or my ex-wife or estranged wife. I never know quite what to say when that topic comes up, but I know that however it plays itself out, it's going to be okay. I'm not going to say I don't worry about money, because there's just been a lot of money that's been spent on this, but I know that it's going to be okay, and I know that as soon as I step in here, there is somebody who's been through such a bad divorce. There's somebody who's done everything that I've done, and there's support, and there's not judgment. I can say whatever the case is, except the one thing that I still don't want to say, but but everything else I could say, and I'm sure if I told you guys, so yeah. Is that it? Oh, another time one. Yeah, that's definitely another time. No, but from my time with the program and meeting such amazing people and hearing such incredible stories, it's just made me feel like there's a calmness and there's an end. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. And I know that if I didn't have the program with everything I'm going through right now, I know where I would be. And right now I would be somewhere drinking. But I'm not, and I feel a million times better. I feel like I can handle what's going to come my way no matter what it is. I feel like I'm a better dad to my son than I've ever been. He doesn't have to see me throw up because I drank too much like he has, which is embarrassing, and it's something that I've had my discussions with him, and I made an amends to him. But this program, as cliche as it sounds, like it works if you work it, but the truth of the matter is, I feel it in my life. I feel in the way that I approach things that I would have never have approached it the same way if it would have been, a year ago. I don't argue with my ex anymore. If she doesn't want to pay, my son plays, He plays hockey. It's super freaking expensive. If she doesn't want to pay it, then don't pay it. I guess I'll have to, see you in court, I guess. I don't know. I'm not worrying about it anymore. And I would have been. And she's bringing her boyfriend, who she had before we moved out. Before I moved out, she already had the boyfriend, and she brought him into the whole mix with my son. I know now just to be like, hey, you want to meet him? No, I don't. Do you want to talk to him about hockey expenses? And like, no. And it's not, before it used to be a fight. It would have been like, well, this, that, and the other thing, poor me that you're saying this. Now it's just calm. It's just calm. I'm just doing the next right thing. And I never would have done that. I never would have done that without the people that I see. When you see people who have like 30, 40 years and they're happy, I was never happy. And now in one of the, which should be one of the worst times of my life, I'm actually kind of happy. I have community. And I realize that the whole thing about drinking, it's not just about drinking, it's your mindset. It's about everything else. It's about getting up in the mornings and surrendering your life to a higher power, to reading the prayers, to going through life in a certain way. Otherwise, you're just like white knuckling it. And that's what I was doing for most of my life. Like, yeah, I didn't have those moments. I wasn't behind a dumpster, but I ruined 2 marriages on myself. I did that. So there was back in New York, when I was growing up as a wee lad, they had a commercial with this dude that was smoking weed. And it's like, yeah, I smoke pot every day and nothing that bad has ever happened to me. And then his mom's like, hey, did you look for a job today? And he's like trying to get to brush away the pot smell. And that was kind of like my life. Like nothing really bad happened to me, but what about all the human wreckage? There's 2 marriages, the children that were involved, the people that I hurt. Yeah, there was, I may have not had this, incredibly bleak bottom, but it was bad enough that I hurt a lot of people. And I don't want to do that anymore. I wasn't proud of myself. And that's part of the reason why, I did drink. I thought I was a good drinker because I could drive home. I didn't remember where I left my car, but I never smashed up or anything. I thought that my dad had given me like special skills because I could drink and not really, in my head, not get drunk. But now thinking back, God, how many times did I drink and drive? How many people could I have killed? I could have killed myself. I drove with my kid like that, So this is just a way to, it's a guideline for life. And I think that you see the miracles every time you hear somebody speak that has time and what their life looks like now. And that's what I want. So another thing of like, yeah, if you want what we have, do the steps kind of thing. Well, yeah, I want that. And that's why tomorrow will be 6 months for me. Yeah, and I feel like this has really been something that has changed my life already. So I plan to, I know it's a day by day, but I definitely plan to keep coming to meetings, keep meeting with my sponsor, even if he gets pissed off at me because sometimes my schedule's a little fucked up. But I keep on planning to do what I need to do to make this happen and make it work and to be a better person. And I think that. I will leave off with that I think there's something that brings people here. It could be that there's a forced thing because you got a DUI or there's some sort of court thing. But deep down inside, I think what brings a person here and what keeps them here is that they want to just be a better person. They don't want to be guilty. They want to be able to wake up in the morning and feel like, yeah, I'm a good person and I'm doing the right things. I'm not just this piece of crap. So I'll keep coming back, and thank you guys for listening to me and listening to my story. I appreciate it.
The prayer. It's God grant us the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, but change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. All right. Now our main speaker will share his or her experience, strength, and hope with us. Please join me in welcoming Jerry. Thank you, Jerry.
I'm a his today. Grateful to be in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name's Jerry, and I am an alcoholic. It's a hard one to follow. Good job. Good job. I got sober December 4th, 1987, and I was 29 years old at that time, just shy of 30, and things weren't going well. You know, there's so many, you'll hear a lot of the part. I mean, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is the deal. I mean, if you want to get sober, learn it. Don't just read it, learn it. And I used to sit in the bathtub because I'm one of them ADHD guys or whatever. I just was told that recently. And I'm so open for learning today. And, you know, let me bring it back here. I used to sit in the bathtub and read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous for hours, or I'd sit in the jacuzzi and I'd read the big book of Alcoholics. Because if I didn't, I'd fall asleep. You know, and it really helped me with my sleeping when I first got sober. Because I'd try to read it in bed and that, and I'd end up falling asleep. You know, it's, you know, and it would, hello, Nick. Good to see you, buddy. Ditto. You know, you get to meet people, and there was a birthday for 44. Congratulations. And welcome to all the newcomers. Love it. You know, it's, I got sober at Birch, Southwest Delano Club. And I grew up, basically, at the Southwest Delano Club. Started going there, I was about 10 years old. And I went there with my dad, because he took me the places he didn't want to go. And that was to Alcoholics Anonymous. And, you know, I think I got more out of it than he did, but, you know, it's still, you know, doing that. I went to Alateen for a while and went to both Birch and Manhattan Beach Club at that time. And, you know, it helped me with his drinking, and I thank the Al-Anon family group for that, because it did. It helped me get through, which most of my siblings still have resentments over that time towards him. And, but it didn't help me with my drinking. I started drinking at probably about 13, 14 years old. It was controlled drinking. My mom, she controlled it for me. And she passed away with about 45 years of Al-Anon. And she was a very, mostly patient Al-Anon, you know, but I had 4 siblings. I mean, there was 6 of us. There was 6 of us, and I had a brother, older brother, is 5 years older than I, and an older sister. And I was right there, number 3, and I had 3 sisters under me. And, you know, it's, none of them have a problem with alcohol. I have 2 daughters, and one of them has just celebrated 20 years. And, you know, I got here with a major, major resentment. I mean, that major, I wanted to kill somebody. And I came pretty close to doing that when he came over to my house one night. And it was that resentment that took my drinking into overdrive. And like I said, he came over to my house. I had gotten custody of my two daughters because of that situation. And it was 2 years before I got sober, 1985, early 1985, I got custody of them. And thank God for those sisters, because one of them, mainly one of them, she had temporary custody for a while, and then until the courts gave me custody. And I was really not in a really good position to father at that time. But they gave me custody, and my sister continued to take care of them, and my other sister, I had, like I said, two sisters that really stepped up, and I had hired a live-in. She cared for my daughters, and I always counted my life was always dependent upon money. It was the main goal. I had never really, I used to lend money out in 7th and 8th grade. I had a paper route that I was very successful with, and my mom was the area advisor, and I'd a lot of times run 200 papers a day just to take care of my ego, and then I would go to school and lend money to guys at school and make a little money off of that. And, it was all about money. It really was. I mean, in fact, I ran into a friend that Everett worked with that his name was Daniel. His name is Daniel, and he's got quite a few years sobriety now, and it was his brother that I ran around with, and he had a paper route too, and we were the buddy system, and my life was always dependent on being able to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. Selfish, self-seeking, and self-centeredness is the root, and and that was really before I started drinking, but I was a very spirited kid, very spirited. And, if things didn't go my way, I did it my way. And it wasn't always pretty. And until I found alcohol. And when I found alcohol, everything kind of pieced out. It was just, everything was good. And give me a few Long Island iced teas and I was grand. Before it was Long Island iced tea, it was beer, and then it was, it got a little bit harder, and, I liked Daniel's Rocks, and I liked all that good stuff, and, but really found heaven behind it. I mean, that feeling of usefulness and everything, that came along with the alcohol. That in the book, it talks about alcohol being our maker. I understand that as God. Alcohol was my God. It did for me what I could not do for myself. And if you have a problem with the definition of God, look it up in the dictionary and do a little studying on it, because it's nothing more than a higher power. Keep it simple, and that's... Man, I had a really good teacher at Birch. They didn't care. They'd tell you the way it is. I mean, they just put it out there. If you liked it, great. But if you didn't like it, great. And that was just the way they looked at stuff. And, it's kind of like the steps and traditions. I learned this. My sponsor took me through the steps formally. I did them a lot before I did it formally, but it's much more comfortable when it's done formally. you actually learn that you've actually completed something and with someone else, and the feeling is good. And it's not always good right away, but it ends up being good. And that's mostly what my life's been since I've gotten sober, is good, with all the things that go with life. You know, I started drinking. We like to do the cruises down Hermosa Avenue on Friday nights. Then we continue sometimes on Saturday nights. And I was about 16 years old when I got my license, and I had fixed up this 1966 Ford Econoline, and had a little tank in the back, underneath the seat, that was for the windshield wiper fluid. And we used to fill it up with whatever the drink of the evening was. Just pull that little tube out and bzzz, hit the buzzer, and all of a sudden we fed us some alcohol. You know? We're creative. I'm telling you, alcoholics are creative. We like to say we're real smart, but yeah, we're creative, you know, and it's usually a monster, you know, and that's what it ends up being, a monster. And you know, growing up around Alcoholics Anonymous it's tough. It's like slipping, you know, and I never really looked at it as a slip. But I would show up around Alcoholics Anonymous. It was either a female or, you know, I met first of all, my sister, that Millie, she, God bless her, she just lost her 60-year-old husband to cancer in less than a month. And she was the one that, she's my mom number two. I mean, she is a caregiver. She's a beautiful lady, and she was Al-Anon also, and she had her and her husband at the time did the dances on Friday night over at Birch, and these things were wild. 150 people, and just so I got involved with you know, when I was in trouble with drinking, I would go back to AA, but I wouldn't stand up as a newcomer. I didn't want them to know I was an alcoholic. They all knew it, but I didn't want them to know. That even created a rule. Because I always claimed to be, you know, if it needed, I was Al-Anon. Backdoor alcoholic. I went to Alateen, part of the family group. So I was asked to be on the board of directors, and I was a few years sober. And I mean, before I got sober, and I was probably about 17, 18, and I'd been going back there, and I met my girl's mom, and her mom was sober, and so I'd go to the dance, and when I got on the board of directors there at Birch, I had went up to my brother's wedding, and my mom was just talking about it. She was working at the coffee bar, and she had mentioned how that part my brother had his little alcoholic thinking, but he had his, I don't know, was an alcoholic, I guess, but he had his reception the night before his wedding. And it was a hell of a party. They had it on a like a 75-foot yacht, and it was a hell of a party. And coming back, you know, I dropped a bunch of food in the parking lot, bringing it back to the car and stuff, and I was partying all weekend and that, and it got back to a couple of the old timers over at Birch. And they created a rule that if you're Al-Anon, you can't drink while you're on the board. A friend of mine who was on the board at the same time was Jim A. And Jim called it the Redmond rule. And I never lived it down. But, and that's it. We're chameleons. I mean, that's basically what we are, as chameleons. We blend into whatever it takes. And I'm no different. Man. So I ended up, I got custody of my daughters after, in 1985, 2 years before, and 1987, I got sober. I had my last, 87 was a hell of a year. My first DUI was like, I want to say it was April, May of, it's hard to recollect them times. I had been to I forget, I think it was a Hearns Hagler fight. It was over at a buddy's house in Hermosa, and I was running home. I had to go pick up my, I had to be home, and I was driving home, and I stopped at Redondo Beach, and I was living in Lawndale at the time, and stopped at Redondo Beach in Hawthorne, and I stopped there and stopped for the red light. And it went green, and then went yellow, and went red. It went green, yellow, and red.
Oh, God.
Oh, Jesus.
About 5 or 6 times the officer had told me in the report. And yeah, he did. There was a few of them there. There ended up being a few. It was right at the border of Torrance, Sheriff's, and Redondo Beach. So they all had a little get-together to find out where I was going. And, I guess it happened long enough, and that was it. It was my first blackout that I was reminded of. I went in, my attorney was sober at the time. He was my best friend. He ended up being my best man at my wedding. And he's coming out. He had gotten it reduced to wet reckless. And he said, Jerry, as we're walking out of Torrance Court, out in the walkway there, he says, if you drink and drive, he says, you're going to be back in here with us in less than probably 3 to 6 months. And said, I'm not going to drink and drive. I'll get a taxi or whatever. I was drinking and driving that night. And that's the illness, man. That's the alcohol talking. And that's who was running my life, was alcohol. And I didn't understand that at that time. So I started drinking and driving again, and yeah, October, I got my second DUI, and there was an accident involved. Rear-ended a parked car, and my car went up into a yard and was heading for master bedroom of a family that lived there. And thank God there was a tree that was in front, and my second blackout. I was wandering around in the street. I had a suit on. I didn't have any shoes on. And that's how I woke up the next morning at the Redondo Beach jail for the second time. And, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers was not, they were lobbying the courts pretty hard about that time. And, the judge said, you had the wet reckless. And now that's a DUI again. And that's your second one. So, you're going to have to do some time, some jail time. And, I had went to Hawthorne High and I played ball with a few of the Hawthorne police, and I had to do time, and I had custody. I was a single father, and went through that whole routine of trying to get the easier, softer way. The judge looked at my attorney and said, "Jim, the only reason I'm doing this," Jim was my attorney. He said, "Jim, the only reason I'm doing this is because of the service that you do to the community and the fact that his kids don't need that." Because I was a single father at the time. And, I had started going to AA meetings. I was going over to the Wednesday night men's stag over at Broadway men's stag. And I got real tight with the men's stag, which I never really wanted to be involved with the men's stag. But taught me a lot. My sponsor was a railroad guy who was my second sponsor. The first sponsor I got when I first got sober was a guy that had a lot of women chasing him, and sounded like a good sponsor to me. And that's just how, that's the thinking of an alcoholic. That's just, it's I hate to say it, but it's about more. If it feels good, do it till it hurts, man. And that's the story of my life. If it feels good, do it till it hurts. And that's how I did life, everything was extreme. My gambling, I'd leave, I'd go out for a few drinks and I'd end up in Vegas. And, the reason I knew I was in Vegas, I didn't have any chips left, but there was an ashtray next to the bed that said Imperial Palace. And it was funny because what was funny was my last DUI was a guy, George M. And George M. was, my dad had left me money. My dad was sober also, and stepdad. And my last DUI, he had left me. He went in and bailed me out, but they couldn't let me go yet. And he had left some money for me to take a cab home. Well, I don't know what I was thinking. I just walked across the street and was standing out in front of Ernie Lopez's bail bonds there, and George came by and picked me up. And George was someone I'd never seen in town. He was another realtor. I was in real estate at the time, and he's another realtor that had an office over in Hawthorne. And the only time I'd ever see George is at the Imperial Palace. And George came by and seen me standing there in my suit and socks. The bus stopped and picked me up and took me home. And, it's just, and George came to AA right probably about 6-7 months after that. He got sober and is still sober. And, it's getting back to my sponsor that formally took me through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. He was, the guy was just full of AA. And, I can remember before I got involved with him, I went to I'd go to meetings, I couldn't sit through the whole meeting, so I'd end up going out in front at Birch. I'd go out in front and I'd stand by the tree there, and someone else, like myself, would come out and we'd just have a conversation, and all these people were, it changed, you know, but I was pretty consistent. I couldn't sit through a meeting without going outside, and it's funny because who became my sponsor was Lee. And Lee would walk by on Sundays. He was regular on Sundays, 10 a.m. meeting. And he said, Jerry, he's a little black dude, about 5'5", and look at me and say, Jerry, that tree's been there for a long time. How long are you going to be here? And that resentment kept me coming back. I was going to stay sober in spite of that man. And that's exactly it takes what it takes, man. And they didn't mind giving out resentments. I mean, you know, I don't care. I was sitting in that back row and look at these guys, and they'd say something, and I'd get so pissed off. They were talking about me. You know, that's the relationship that we find out in Alcoholics Anonymous. They're not talking about us. They're talking about their story. You know, they're sharing their story. But they didn't care. I mean, it was. I love AA back in that time. It was serious, but a lot of laughter. And there was another guy. Frank C., I actually got to be with him when he passed away at just shy of 101 years old. And he was a mailman, and he had a hell of a story. He had a hell of a pitch. But I got to be there when he passed, and that was. But he used to get up in front of me. It seemed like my parents were very strong in the program, and yeah, when they found out I was willing to get sober, willing to admit I was powerless, they just said, stay there. Don't leave. I was living downstairs. At that time, I was living downstairs from them because I had a home in South Redondo, and I had roommates. And I had, when I got custody of the girls, I had to move. So I moved over. They had a 2-bedroom, 1-bath downstairs from them. And I moved in there, and that second DUI, I was standing down at the bottom of the stairs, and when I got in, when George dropped me off, and big, tall gentleman sitting there, and they were remodeling the house, my mom and dad's house, and he's sitting down, he's programmed, he's down at the bottom of the stairs, and we just talked for about an hour and a half. And thank God he was there, you know, because I hadn't found out that I had the accident, that DUI. I hadn't found I had that accident until I went down to Scotto Towing, and went in the backyard there after I checked that, and the whole front end, brand new Nissan Maxima, was kind of bashed in there, and drove around like that for a little while because my thinking said if I turn it in, they're gonna raise my insurance. Well, they raised my insurance before I even got it fixed. So, yeah, it's just bright thinking, you know. So I was driving around a beat up still had paper plates on it. You know, it's our thinking, you know.
Wobbling down the highway.
But, you know, what happened, though, is I went through the steps with Lee, and at the end of the steps, he says, Jerry, it's time to start the 12 traditions. And I thank that man for today, because that changed that. To me, the steps, You know, and they used to say at Birch, you have to develop a manner of living by which you can stay sober one day at a time. And it was said by everybody there, it seemed like. It just sounded like chatter. Pam, 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 pam. And, of course, me with my ego the way I am, I'm going to be the best at everything, you know. But got into those traditions, and he says, you know, the 12th step, it says, we have to give this away. And I was just kind of balking at this 12 traditions, and he says, yeah, well, he says, you don't have to do them, but you're going to be giving it away the way you've given everything away. And that's conditionally. There isn't, you know, you said you were selfish, self-seeking, and self-centered. That's got a lot to do with selfishness. You know, that's how we give things away, is with expectations. With expectations. It's either my way or the highway, you know, and that's opposite of what them things say. You know, it's, I've learned a lot in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I can't stop learning. I have to keep it. I have to keep it going. In the book, it talks about, you know, I just love the book. The chapter, I mean, the foreword to the first edition, it talks about we are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. They left out one thing. They left out the spiritual malady. You know, and of course Lee was there to answer that. He says, yes. He says, that's where we have to have a daily reprieve based upon our spiritual maintenance, because we have a spiritual malady, and that malady started before alcohol. And that malady is what we hear from my pitch starting off, is I did not understand what alcoholism was. Therefore, I didn't have it in my mind. And that was what I had to learn, is that I do have it. And that was you know, and that was explained to me in a lot of different ways. Is that, you know, chapter 4 says it, I mean, yeah. Chapter 4 in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the first paragraph says, you know, we want to make it, paraphrasing, we want to make it perfectly clear that if you want to quit drinking and find you can't quit entirely, or after taking that first drink you can't control the amount you take, then you are probably an alcoholic, and that only a spiritual experience can conquer it. Boom. That was a hell of an awakening. Because we have all these ideas of what an alcoholic is, but they're usually not the real reason. You know, the real reason is that it took care of what I couldn't take care of by myself. You know, and along with all that other stuff that we get here with, you know, all them other obsessions, all that other stuff. You know, and I've got it. You know, and I get to have that life. Going through. I got sober in '87. I got married in '89 to an Al-Anon, which, ooh boy, I love them. You know, and we got married, and in 1990, I got in a car accident and hit by a drunk driver. Go on my way to a big book study on Sunday night over at Birch.
Talk about full circle.
And He was doing about 70 miles an hour. I was getting off the freeway. I was in the rightmost left-hand turn lane, getting off at the Harbor Freeway, El Segundo off ramp, and there was a big panel van next to me, and he started to take off, and I was just on the right-hand side of him. Well, he seen the car coming. He stopped. And the only thing that saved my life is I didn't see it coming. And he hit me at about 70 miles an hour, they had estimated. No skid marks. And changed my life, man. I ended up walking away from, I was in shock, and I wouldn't go to the hospital. And so I went on, I had the secretary, we were co-secretaries at the time, come pick me up. He picked me up, and I went to the meeting. But my wife had came down, found out, and came down and picked me up, and went to the hospital, and had glass in my legs. I was wearing shorts. It was a sunroof. Thank God it was open, because I ended up on the seat and head sticking out top of the car there, and but I walked away from what was a trip. I was standing there, and the cops were sitting there still after they had picked everything up and that. And I went over to the cop car and asked him, "What are you guys waiting for?" And he says, "Well," he says, "this guy, he won't tell us his name. He was." He just wouldn't tell him his name, so they were sitting there waiting for a supervisor to come in. And in the back seat, he's wearing a shirt and there's blood dripping down it, and it said, "See Dick drink, see Dick drive. Don't be a dick."
Oh my God.
And I looked back and I looked at them. I said, "His name's Dick." And yeah, it's about as much as I remember of that whole. I mean, it was totally sober, but in shock. And it's then right after that accident, about 4 or 5 months later, we found out that my wife at the time had breast cancer, and it became, and that was that started in 90, early 92, and it went till. It went till 1999. She was constantly getting chemo, and ended up. It was very. I had two another agent that I worked with, and his wife got it, and she passed away from it, and another lady that we knew in AA had actually passed away from it. Yeah, very aggressive cancer, and so they dosed her up with chemo and radiation and that. And, it was a rough time, and she was very vain and did not want nurses or anything at the house. And so I used to take care of, she had like 3rd-degree burns on her breasts, and it was like changing they have a saline with the whatever they put in it, anesthetic, to knock it down a bit, numb it out. But, we went for almost 6 years with that, and 1999, she decided that she wanted to be single again, and, that was I'd never planned on not being married, so it was a little bit of a shock there. And, it's these are the things we go through in life that happen, that if we don't have what we have in these books and through the people in AA, and through the sponsor, you're alone. You know, and in the AA tradition, in the back of the book, it talks about that. It says, you know, that if we don't hang together and stay together, we'll die alone. And that's what happens to us when we fall away from the program, is a lot of us end up dying alone. And stick around long enough and you'll go through those that go through that part, and it's not fun. I mean, it's good friends, good people, and they just kind of disappear. And I don't want to be one of those people, and that's why I keep coming back, doing what I do. And, you know, it's amazing. You know, I just had a friend that happened to. You know, and we think that we're okay. We go out there and do that, but it ends up not being that way. But, you know, I really, it took a lot of praying to do this tonight, because I had a surgery about 3 months ago. I mean, 3 years ago. It's almost it'd be 3 years, and actually it was 3 years. And had a piece of bone growing around my spinal cord. And it had started cinching down on my spine. It had been happening for years. The doctor said there's a disease connected to it, but from that accident, he said it probably happened. I had a fracture on my spine, and one of the vertebrae, there was calcified bone growing around my spinal cord, and tying it off, it grew around and got tight enough to where I started falling. I was on my boat, and I was washing my boat, and I just kind of came to going, what the hell just happened? And I did, you know, I went through, it took 5 days to figure it out, and that 5 days it came, and the doctor comes in, it's in the evening, and my daughters had finally gotten in to see me, and together, and he was there, and you know, I went in the next morning, and they'd actually said, you got a 50-50 chance of making it through it, and you know what, I was not concerned at that time. I just told him, I said, man, I hope you got steady hands, because he said if it broke, I was gone. You know, and I'm here. You know, I'm here, and thank God. And that's what I do on a daily basis, is because, you know, whatever your question is about God, it's okay. You can have that question. We just have to believe that there is something greater than us. And that's what's kept me sober for this amount of time, 37 years later. And I want to thank Andy for asking me out to do this. It's been a pleasure, and thank you.
Yeah.